Right now, let's talk about something just incredibly worrying, and it's been going on and rising for many, many years, but extraordinarily, this is something that gets worse at the worst possible times. Reports of anti-Semitic incidents in the UK spiked after the deadly Manchester synagogue attack last year. We are looking at 3,700 anti-Jewish hate incidents recorded last year. It was up from the year before, but only below the peak in 2023, which was, of course, the year that we saw the October 7th attack. But why are we seeing more anti-Semitic attacks when Jews are the victims of horrific attacks, including murder? Let's talk to Dr. David Rich. He's Director of Policy at the Community Security Trust. Now, that's the charity that protects British Jews from terrorism and anti-Semitism. Good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, David, for joining us. Well, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, these figures. I mean, it works out as, on average, 10 anti-Semitic incidents a day. The big concern, though, is that at the point when Jews are the victims of horrific crimes like the October the 7th massacre, like the murders at the Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester, that is when we see a spike in more attacks on Jews and hatred of Jews. What is going on?
It's unfathomable, really. Last year, we saw the first fatal terrorist attack against the Jewish community in this country that anyone can remember. 2 Jewish people tragically lost their lives in synagogue on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year. And while the vast majority of the country responded to this with utter shock and horror, and there was genuinely an outpouring of sympathy and support for the Jewish community, a small minority of people are so seemingly entrenched in their hatred and their prejudice that they saw Jewish people killed in synagogue and they were excited by it, or they wanted to see more of it and they wanted to celebrate it.
Well, we saw it on the streets. We saw people organising marches that very day, the next day, dancing, singing, celebrating in train stations, on the streets of this country, seemingly shamelessly.
It's a very similar thing to what we saw after October 7th, as you say. We saw a similar, smaller spike after the terrible shooting on Bondi Beach at a Hanukkah party in December. And I think this is a sign to us of just how deeply entrenched this hatred is and how much effort we are going to have to put in as a country to deal with this, because this is not what the vast majority of people in this country want. It's not what Britain is about. But we need really far-reaching and effective measures to tackle the hateful ideologies and the extremism that drive this anti-Semitism.
Well, exactly. Look, we know from the polling that the majority of people in this country are not anti-Semitic and are horrified by this, but we also know there's a growing minority, particularly among young people who live a lot of their lives online, and particularly also among certain communities, let's name who they are, Muslim communities, who have been entrenched in coming from Pakistan or coming from the Middle East, where anti-Semitism is completely the norm. It is absolutely the norm in societies there. I mean, again, everyone's got to stop pretending that it isn't. We've imported a lot of this problem, and it's a big issue, particularly on the left. It's part of this sort of this pyramid of who's a victim and who's an oppressor. And it is growing. And let's be honest, we've had a lot of politicians, including Keir Starmer. They talk the talk, they say all the right things, but are they doing enough to stop it?
We get a lot of support from this government and the previous government for security in the Jewish community. There's millions of pounds spent by government on security guards at Jewish schools and synagogues. It's really welcome and important, but it's only tackling the symptom. It's not tackling the ideology and the extremism. So much of this spreads on social media. I think you're right to look at young people and that online space as where so many of these conspiracy theories and stereotypes circulate. A lot of it is driven by the kind of hatreds and emotions in the way some people respond to what's happening in the Middle East. And then the impact of that is ordinary Jewish people going about their lives, getting abused, shouted at them on the street by random strangers just because they're Jewish. And it's affecting daily life in this country.
And that's the difference, isn't it? Because a lot of it, people will say, no, this is about Israel, this is anti-Zionism, that's a perfectly legitimate political view to hold. It's not anti-Jew. And, you know, whether it's a demonstration outside a synagogue or pro-Palestinian marches, supposedly for Gaza, that's what they claim. And yet, we don't see any other group in society, any other ethnic group or nationality or religious group who are held accountable for crimes of governments or alleged crimes, people's criticism of other governments abroad. You know, we don't hold sort of, you know, we don't hold Muslims responsible for what the Syrian regime or the Iranian regime does. We don't hold Christians responsible for what a Christian country does. And yet this is the only group of people who are held uniquely responsible for supposedly the unique crimes. They're not, but or even indeed crimes of the Israeli government. And this is the thing. It is a different situation. But when we have a situation where we have hate marches on the streets, when we have people dancing in the streets, when we have politicians, basically pushing, basically pandering, and police officers in Birmingham, over the Maccabi Tel Aviv, pandering to Muslim community leaders and often extremists threatening violence against people because they're Jewish or because they're Israeli. It is understandable why people would think that they could get away with anti-Semitic crimes. They could get away with protests outside a Jewish restaurant in Notting Hill, or daubing paint on a Jewish business, or attacking a child on a school bus for having a blazer from a Jewish school, or going to a synagogue with a knife. They would think that that was okay, wouldn't they?
I think the people in the Jewish community have wanted stronger action for quite some time. And this isn't about preventing protest. It isn't about preventing normal politics. It's about tackling the extremism and the anti-Semitism within those protests. It's about tackling extremists within communities rather than whole communities. We are starting to see stronger action. We have seen a number of different kind of foreign hate preachers prevented from entering the country in recent weeks. We're starting to see more arrests for violent language on protests. But I think this needs to be sustained. It needs to be really embedded so that red lines are laid down across society. And this isn't just for government and police. It's for regulators. It's for charities. It's for schools and universities. You know, we need to make it clear across the whole of society that anti-Semitism is unacceptable, that extremism should have no place in our country. And that's the only way we're going to roll this back over time.
Yeah, and again, I think also a lot of people realising that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine for a society that is going in a very, very, very bad direction. And in every country where this has been allowed to rise in the same way as it has in this country in recent years, it has led to worse problems for everybody. It is something we need to stand up against. And I'm very much of the view these days, you know what, if you're silent, you're complicit. And if you don't speak out and you don't say, you call for action, you are complicit in it. Dr. David Rich from the Community Security Trust, thank you so much for joining us. Claire Pearsall, listening to this, I mean, again, well, politicians talk a good game, but I'm sorry, I'm still fuming at the fact those blokes who drove down to London and drove around down the end of my street shouting they were going to rape the Jewish wives and daughters of men there on a megaphone, on camera. They've never been charged with a crime. That tells you all you need to know. You can get away with it in this country.
It's the shrug of the shoulders. Oh well, yeah, we'll get them next time. And
don't sort of go. Don't go make a nice speech after the event. Start arresting people.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? And that was really interesting what David said. It's tackling the symptoms. The government putting money into security around synagogues and schools. It's only treating the symptoms. How about treating the root cause? How about getting those people off the street every other week?
Exactly. Why did those places need to have security guards? Did your school have security guards?
No.
No, my school didn't have security guards. Why?
No.
But why do those schools have security? That's all you need to know.
Exactly.
And who are the people who are a threat to them? And again, another thing that people don't like to talk. Yeah. Who are those people making those threats, daubing the paint? Who do you think they are? Do you know who they are? Yeah. Everyone knows who they are. But we'll all just pretend we don't know who they are. We've imported the problem. We're now breeding the problem, and it's a problem. And if we make a choice,
it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse, and they're not going to deal with it because it's too awkward politically, particularly for one particular party. It's the Labour Party. That is a very big issue.